veg is a natural treat. Oh, for your garden blossoms, blooming soil sweet. So come join us, you will enjoy it. You'll stay informed when you are gardening with hope.
So today on Hope for Your Garden, I'm going to show you some fun edible plants to have in your yard. This is the musa, the banana. It's an edible banana leaf. This one is ornamental, but you can use the leaves for cooking, and then it won't produce fruit, but it'll give you a really tropical look in your garden. They're fairly low, easy. They can take full sun or partial shade. And they do like water, but after they get established, if you have good soil, they'll actually be pretty drought resistant. On the banana leaves, you just cut them back, and I like to go and trim up my older leaves, which helps them produce new leaves, and you just go in. They hold an incredible amount of moisture in the leaves themselves, and so they work beautiful for steaming. This past weekend we made a turkey. We covered it with banana leaves, then covered it with tin foil and baked it in the oven, and it came out so juicy and tender. The last 20 minutes of cooking, turned up the oven, took the leaves off, and we went ahead and gave it a little browning in color. The flavor of the meat is sweet and tender. You can actually make tamales in these leaves, and you can steam vegetables. You can add rice and veggies, or rice and meat, and then fold them up like a little tamale package, steam them. But they make food so flavorful and so tender. The banana leaf, or the banana, is actually considered one of the largest herbs. Great for fun, for kids, for you. Enjoy. So for those of you who are on the coastal area and can grow fuchsias, there's a new one out. It's called Blackie. It's a 2011 hybrid, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It starts out this really black with kind of a burgundy pink sepal, and then it fades to kind of a pinky and burgundy color. They're absolutely gorgeous, and this one again is called Blackie, and I believe it's just a very short amount that'll be available this year. So one of the questions that I've been getting a lot is the little black aphid on apple trees. And because of our rain this year, it seems that it's just everywhere. I get daily calls for this. So it causes the apple trees to become really curly and kind of deformed. They curl up, and if you look on the undersides, you'll see the little black aphids that get in there and cause damage. And so, easy enough to kill and spray. 8 is a great one. You could also use 7. You can use any spray that lists for apples and aphids, and it will take care of it. If the damage is really, really curled up, you would want to go ahead and pull those leaves off, because it's really hard to get inside there. And then go ahead and spray your tree, and it'll get all happy again. And today on the show, we're going to show you how to prune up your tomato plants. So my tomato plants we planted about a month ago, and they're now starting to just really take off. We have them in the mushroom compost. We've used Osos and Mycos on them, and this is a San Francisco fog, and I'm just going to prune it up so it can really start to set some fruit and start developing its fruit. What I like to do is go in and prune off all of the secondary leaves. And these are what they call sucker leaves, and they're just the leaves that really don't produce anything. And so I'll throw them to the side and pick them up later. You don't want to leave them around the plants, because they can cause diseases to spread back into your soil if they're infected with anything. And I'll also show you a little speck and spot and how to do that, how to take care of that. So this is what we're calling the secondary shoot. So this is just a leaf. It'll photosynthesize sun, but it doesn't actually give to the plant, so it actually takes up a lot of energy. So what I like to do is go in and prune just at where that new little shoot is coming out, and that is the one that's going to produce your fruit. And so we'll leave those on. And this will really help cut down on diseases, and it also helps the plant stay really strong because now it can take all the energy from those roots and push it out into the leaves that are there. And so you can see that the plant size now is really going to change because I'm taking off a lot of leaves. And these are usually the leaves that get diseased first. And so it's good to take them off as well for that very reason, that then you don't have spotted leaves or speck leaves on your plant that can infect the rest. Taking off these extra leaves will also help keep your plant a uniform size and allow light and air to move through, so your plant able to dry out so that you don't get as much powdery mildew, black spot, all of the diseases that are commonly known and grown with tomatoes. So it'll also help me keep it in a nice shape where I can keep it up on its stake. I also have a squash plant that came up wild and is growing. This is not the ideal place. I'm leaving it on because it's a special squash, but it's not my ideal idea to even though squash and tomatoes grow well together because of the disease factor. So I would say try to keep your tomatoes separate if you can. And once you get the majority of your leaves clipped off, then you can go ahead and tie them up to the cage just to give them a little extra support. I like to use green tie that has a give. You could also use the green twist ties. You just want to be careful that the wire inside is covered by either plastic or some type of paper, because if that wears off, it can actually cut through your plants and kill branches when they get heavy with fruit. And then I like to do the figure 8 pattern, just tying a little figure 8 and then pulling them up to the next area that I'll be tying to. And this will give as the plant grows and stretches so that and so this almost makes like a little sling. It will give with the plant, and so it won't bind it or cut it, damaging your leaves later, or breaking off whole sections with fruit on them, because that's horrible. Okay, and so now as this is growing on, I can just keep cutting away those secondary leaves, and you can see we're starting the flowering cycle. Another good thing to put on right now at this point when you have your flowers going is to go ahead and add about a half a cup of Epsom salts, and you can even do that at the beginning when you plant, and that will help you keep you from getting blossom end rot. And that's where the bottoms of your tomatoes turn black or brown. Blossom end rot is a calcium deficiency, so you can use the calcium magnesium, which is basically Epsom salts, and so that's an excellent one. You could also go ahead and use calcium carbonate spray, and that's one that you mix into a liquid and you spray on the leaves, and that will also help you keep from getting the blossom end rot. And even though it's basically for that and help photosynthesizing the sun. It also, the calcium carbonate will help against diseases because it actually changes the pH on the outside of the leaves so that those bacteria and fungus can't grow. So this is one of my favorite plants for the garden and a great one to put with your tomatoes. This is the purple basil or the perennial basil, and it absolutely smells incredible. You can use the flowers to top your food as well, just like we put this on, we kind of scrunch it up, and then we'll put this on our baked potatoes, little sour cream and butter, and they're phenomenal. And great one, so you can use the flowers as well. Because it's a perennial basil, it doesn't really go to seed. These are just flower heads that will keep going, but they don't drain the plant. They also bring in the bees. The bees absolutely love this plant, and this will help to pollinate all your other fruits and veggies in the garden. So our artichokes are ready, and this is a great time of year, and actually at any time of year you can have artichokes pretty much. They fruit out from 6 months from when you plant them, so you can still get artichokes now, and in 6 months you can have them. I'm getting ready to harvest these, and then I'll whack my plants back. I'll feed them with some manure, mushroom compost, and they'll flush back out and give me a whole new crop. And so I think we're going to make artichoke risotto tonight. So, a couple things about summer. My favorite time of year when we have begonias and peaches. So the non-stops are starting to come out and bloom. And this is a non-stop begonia. And it'll have a flower roughly about that size when it opens up and fills out. It'll have the female flower and these little ones. And then it'll have the big male flower, the big showy flower. So we always want to pull off our female flowers, because what that does, and they're the ones with the little ovaries on the end. It's like a little pyramid, and that's where the eggs or the seeds develop. And that we want to pull off because it'll allow our male flower to get bigger if he doesn't have those on. Sometimes these are single and they're pretty, so every now and then I'll leave a few just for color and showiness. But these are absolutely gorgeous. It's begonia time, so they'll be starting to come out. This year at Osos Valley Nursery, they have the giant tuberous begonias, the uprights, and these will become the size of your head. If you have begonias now and they're just starting to set their blooms, go ahead and pinch them off. You go ahead and pinch the first and the second set of blooms, and that will allow your third and fourth set of blooms to become huge. It'll also allow the plant to become vigorous and healthier so that the plant can actually hold up those blooms, withstand disease, and just be an overall healthier plant with showier flowers. So our plants have started to set their blooms. We've already come in once last month and picked off a lot of the blooms, but I just like to go in and clip those off, even though it's hard to do. I know that it'll be so worth it when my plants are blooming and they're absolutely gorgeous because I picked these off. I want the plant to, maybe even double this size by the time that I let my blooms stay. One of the signs that your begonias would need to be fed is when the leaves point upward and kind of make a cup. And it's kind of like they're putting their hands out saying, feed me. And so when they're flat like this, they're okay. But if they start to get like this or anything near this, I would say feed your plants. I'm going to go ahead and feed these today. I do like to allow my plants to dry out in between waterings, not to wilting, but just so that they don't rot. Begonias like drainage, so I would go ahead and let these drain down, and then I'm going to go ahead and feed them with compost tea. And so I'll take you now to show you how to make a great begonia compost tea, or one that you could even use for your tomatoes. One of the signs that goes with summer is tea. But compost tea, kind of A little bit different, but just as good for the plants, and the plants love tea. I like to make compost tea. There's a couple different ways that you can do it. I like to use a food grade 5-gallon bucket. I use my old deluxe fermenter. You can get these at Doc Sellers for about $11.99. You can also use any food grade bucket that you have that's empty, and it won't have the cute little spigot on the bottom, but you could add yours. I find that these kind of plug up because of the tea sludge on the bottom. Because I don't filter mine through a sack, I just put it in and let it aerate. But you could actually put all your tea mixture into a sack and then float it and do it that way, and then your filter would work, so it would make it a little bit easier. What I like to do is I like to add a 1/4 cup of bat guano, cottonseed meal, kelp meal, fish meal to my composter bucket and alfalfa meal. I'll even sometimes add a little bit of mushroom compost, just about enough to fill up a 1-gallon container. And then I add an aerator and an aerator stone. Now, mine has even gotten broken, but it still works. It works great. You just want air to flow through that mixture. I add my water. If you can add water that sat for 24 hours, it's much better because the chlorine will have evaporated out of it, and so your bacteria have an easier time growing. What I like to do is let that sit in a cool spot for 24 hours. And then right before I'm going to use it, I would add my bacteria and my fungus like mycorrhiza or Osos. And I would stir that in and then go ahead and feed my plants. And the proteins that are in that tea will go ahead and feed your bacteria and your fungus, while those bacteria then feed your plants. And so it's this little constant cycle of eating and feeding that they do while you're outside playing golf or doing something fun or playing in the garden. But the tea, you will see a noticeable difference usually within an hour of feeding your plants tea. They just get perkier and happier. And you can feed lightly anywhere from every 2 weeks to once a month. If when you're making your compost tea, the amount that you would make is 5 gallons, so that 1/4 cup of your bat guano, your kelp meal, your cottonseed meal, to 5 gallons of water. And then you would use 1 cup of that tea per gallon of water that you would feed to your plants. So it really makes a lot of fertilizer to go ahead and water everything in. You do want to use up your compost tea within 48 hours because the bacteria that are in there can start to go anaerobic and they can actually kind of pull from your soil. So you want to get them into the soil within that 48-hour period. You can also buy teas out there. There's Booze Brew, there's Extreme Garden Tea, and those come in these pre-packaged bags, and they have the bacteria added, and they are phenomenal as well. And so you can just buy these pre-done tea bags, stick them in your water, and 24 hours later you're ready to water your plants. And these are phenomenal. We've had excellent luck with the 2 teas that we've gotten, and so keep an eye out for them. And since it's summer, give your plants some tea. We've had a lot of requests to have questions answered about worm bins and how do you put a worm bin together. So I actually have a worm cafe that I've used for many years, and then I got a bin from Christy up at Slow County Worm Farms. And so I'm going to show you a few different things about the differences. They're both excellent bins. If you live up in North County, Christy at Slow County Worm Farms is a great resource for worms, to see how to do it, and she has great bins as well. This is the Worm Cafe, and it actually has 3 tiers and then the lid. And so it's a stackable. They're all stackable. So you put on your bedding layer, we'll put on our veggie layer of your table scraps and such, and then we just go ahead and add our worms and let them digest. Then we'll end up with worm castings, and I'll show you what those look like in just a little bit. Essentially, that's worm poop. It's loaded with great bacteria, great fungus, mycorrhiza. They eat the soil, poop out really good nutrients, and so a lot of those are broken down so that the plants can readily get to them. It also will make, both bins will make leachate, which is what comes after water has passed through that and comes out. Now the tea that you brew is actually brewed from the castings themselves, and then you add those to water, you let it sit, and then you aerate it, and then you get tea. So that's more concentrated. A lot of times your leachate, you're not fully, you don't have a bin full of castings yet, so it's not considered tea yet. But they're both really good to add to your plants. Basically, this one has a little spigot, which is good. Sometimes they get clogged, so you have to kind of clean that area out. This bin has the attachable lid, and then it's got its bottom part, which collects your tea, and then it's got little reservoirs so that the worms, if they do fall in, can get out and be safe. And then with this bin over here, very similar. It has a stand, you don't have the leg issue, and then this has your paper filter so your worms won't go through. This has a bin underneath for the leachate, which is a little bit smaller, but you don't usually get that much of the leachate. So this also has your 3-bin compartment with room for the castings to drop through. They'll actually crawl up. When they're finished eating one area, then they crawl up into the next bin of food. So basically with either bin, you would start out with core, and this is ground coconut husk. And this works as a fattener. It also helps keep them really moist and a good place for them to lay their eggs and have babies. So we basically put in this, and then I'll go ahead and add our worms. Now, I've seen compost bins made completely of napkins and your paper towels. Paper plates are all great to just shred up and add to your bins. I'm going to go ahead and add my worms. These are some that I got from Christie. You can also get worms at any local nursery. So after our core, we would go ahead and add our worms that we just added. Then I add my table scraps. So this is what we collected over the weekend, and I have carrots that are the ends, and greens, and my celery, beets, pineapple, tops and greens, cucumber, and then broccoli is great. The artichokes are really nice because they add a little drier texture to it. Good for aeration. Coffee grounds work really well. I actually have my tea grounds in here. Drink a lot of tea. And so you can pretty much add anything. If you have citrus peels, you don't want to add a lot of them, but you can add a few. Eggshells are great. They add calcium. You use that compost to help with your tomatoes so they don't get blossom end rot. And so the worms will go through about a pound of food a day. And so I have about 6 pounds, so I won't have to add anything for about a week. And you'll see it won't be completely composted, but it'll be a lot smaller and a lot more broken down. It'll resemble that. I really like to add newspaper to the top of my compost as a layer, because for our sandier soils, it turns into almost a clay-like texture. Paper towels, napkins, paper plates also turn into that really thick consistency. You can see this is a chunkier worm castings. And this is pretty much done by using heavier material like the newspaper, which will give you this thicker grade. It also, you can leave your worm castings, like you could leave this stage in there and they'll continue to eat this and make even a finer grade worm castings. And so depending on what you like, I like this grade, but I think it works better in the sandy soils. But if you're in clay, the really fine might work better for you, or if you have potted plants and you want to top dress, the fine might look nicer. Paper plates also turn into that really thick consistency, and so they're excellent, and they don't end up in our landfill. So, and then I just shred paper and add that, and then I'm going to water it down. I'll press on it a tiny bit, but you don't want to really pack it down because you don't want to mess them up. Once I get the paper on top, it makes a really nice moisture holding layer. So I'm just going to go ahead and really get this wet. The core will soak up a lot of the extra water as well. They'll move to the drier material, so they won't be swimming in that bottom wet part. But you can see that kind of makes a nice wet layer on top. And there, we're done. So I'll put my lid on, and then in a week I'll come back, check on my worms, keep it in a shady spot, especially if you're up in Paso. You don't want to cook your worms. You want to keep them about 65, 70 degrees. So just a good shady spot, and then they should be watered up there. You'd probably water a little bit more. It depends on what you have in your bin. But I would check them a couple times a week, and it can feel wet to the touch. You don't want it soggy, but you do want it lightly wet. And that's about it. So they're really easy to keep, and just keep turning over. There's lots of ways to do worm bins. You can even do in the ground where you bury your trash, you add your worms. That way you have to worry about moles a little bit more, and other creatures that like worms. But worms are a lot of fun, great fertilizer, really easy to do, and just overall fun. And great for your plants.